The wind started before dawn, a low growl that shook coffee cups and made the steel deck hum underfoot. 80 miles off Cape Cod, the men on Texas Tower 4 felt the vibrations seep into their bunks and cabinets, a deep-bellied tremor that never quite stopped once it began. It was January 1961, the sky the color of cold iron, and waves were piling in long walls that rose and stiffened as they marched toward the platform. The North Atlantic does not hurry. It leans. It presses. By sunrise, the sea was already shouldering the tower with a steady insistence, and every brace in the structure answered back with its own tired voice. They had called the place Old Shaky since the first month it went live. That morning, no one tried to laugh about it. Texas Tower 4 was a triangle of steel legs and cross-bracing driven into 185 feet of water, topped by a deck carrying living quarters, generators, and a radar dome meant to see far beyond the horizon. It was one node in a chain of early warning stations scattered across the Northeast, each feeding picture and timing to controllers ashore, each intended to buy the mainland minutes that might one day matter. Two sister towers stood in shallower water and bore themselves like sturdy oil rigs. This one, farther out, had been odd from the moment its legs left the shipyard. Transport damage had demanded hurried repairs. The seabed here gave a little when storms leaned on it, and even on calm days the deck shivered like a tuning fork after a pluck. The engineers' memos called the motion measurable. The men who slept above the legs called it a heartbeat they could not escape. Hurricane Donna had torn through the tower the previous September and left its fingerprints everywhere. A maintenance gantry vanished. Plates were bent. Welds cracked along seams that had looked clean a week earlier. Crews arrived with torches and rods and did what good crews do. They made what could stand again. But metal remembers. From that storm on, Old Shaky moved not only up and down, but with a slow torsion, a twist you felt in the soles of your feet as the deck tried to return to true and didn't quite make it. Captain Gordon Larry Phelan, the Air Force officer in charge, began sending firm reports that sounded almost subdued on paper. Additional bracing required, expansion of fatigue, cracks noted, recommend evacuation ahead of the next major system. The bureaucracy absorbed the words and sent back versions of, "We see your concern, maintain watch, and continue repairs." The Cold War logic was simple. Leave a gap, and you might invite a test. So the men stayed, 28 of them that weekend, Air Force radar techs and civilian welders and electricians, because a screen had to stay green. The nor'easter built all day on the 14th and turned mean overnight. By Sunday the 15th, the wind had a tone in it, a hollow note that rattled lockers and made voices carry oddly down the corridors. Seas ran steep and close together, so that the tower took punch after punch instead of long heaves it could ride. Inside the equipment spaces, fluorescent bulbs flickered, steadied, and then hummed as the frames around them trembled. Water hissed through hairline seams along a lower deck bulkhead and sprayed salt into the air like a fine mist. Bolts that had been torqued tight the week before walked themselves a flat quarter turn looser under the rhythm of the blows. Men went about the kind of work people do when danger is both present and patient. They filled logbooks, wiped gauges dry, checked lashings, ran one more hand along a weld they already knew by touch. Phelan's first messages that morning were clipped and factual. Wind speed, sea state, visible damage, the change in the feel of the structure. Helicopters were out of the question. The pad took the gale like a drumhead. Small boats would broach and roll if they tried to dance among the legs. The Coast Guard and Navy turned hulls toward the coordinates and made the best speed they could into a head sea that put green water clear over bows. Ashore, phones lit, duty officers briefed superiors, and a familiar hesitation settled over the decision. Hold if you can. Buy an hour if the gear holds. Don't lose the post unless you must. Orders to prepare for evacuation were passed down the chain with the caveat that weather had to let someone get close. By early afternoon, the tower's motion had changed from a sway to a limp. A cross brace somewhere in the steel forest below had likely yielded. You could feel the difference in the way the deck paused at the top of each roll, as though catching itself on a sore joint. In the generator room, a belt jumped, screeched, and threw rubber threads across the housing. The smell of hot insulation drifted through the control space, metallic and sweet. A radar set blanked, then returned with a faint tremor you could see in the sweep. In the mess, a coffee mug slid, bumped a lip, and fell. Men grabbed for it automatically and then stared at each other with the brittle grins of people pretending nothing had been said. Late afternoon pulled daylight thin. Phelan sent up another report. Unacceptable vibration, suspected failure in lower leg bracing, requesting immediate authorization for full evacuation. The reply came the only way it could. Ships inbound. Stand by for transfer when seas allow. That gap between the order and the ocean was the whole day in miniature. The crew did the things a crew does at the edge of their options. They lashed loose gear. They taped drawers shut. They packed personal items they might never see again because putting something in a bag feels like control. One civilian welder overlapped a cracked gusset with a fresh plate and laid a bead in a wind that tugged the arc sideways. The work smoked and hissed and held for 9 minutes that mattered only to the man making the weld. Sometime after 6, the platform gave a sound you could feel in your teeth. A low, metallic pop that traveled through the deck and up the walls with the clarity of a struck bell. The men in the control space went still without meaning to. Another pop followed, farther off, as if an answer had been called across a dark field. The radio operator steadied his hand on the key and kept speaking into the wind. In the background of the transmission, those listening ashore heard the new sound the steel makes when it stops being many parts and starts being one problem: grinding, a slow tearing under the roar of weather. At 6:45 p.m., the last plain words left the tower. "We're breaking up." There was no drama in the voice, just the flat certainty of a forecast finishing itself. 20 minutes later, the small crouched blip that marked Texas Tower 4 on approaching ships' scopes smeared and then was gone. When searchlights finally swept the place where the legs had met the sea, the water was choked with twisted beams, oil sheening across the chop, insulation fluffing like gray snow among the whitecaps. No faces showed, no voices carried. 28 men were missing in water too cold to bargain with. Only 2 bodies would be recovered in the days ahead. Calm returned like a joke the next morning, the ocean wearing its innocent face. Divers went down on lines into green cold and found the decks folded into one another at the bottom like a dropped card house. A leg had snapped near a joint that Hurricane Donna had first wounded. Once a single major member failed, the pounding found the next weakness and then the next, until the whole geometry of the structure collapsed. Steel that had given years of hints finally said the quiet part loud. The technical language that followed, fatigue, resonance, overstress, only framed what the crew had felt in their bones while the tower still stood. The investigation peered backward through drawings and memos and weather logs. Designers had adapted an oil rig concept meant for gentler sites, then accepted risk when early damage and transport mishaps forced hurried fixes. After Donna, reports stacked up recommending decommissioning or heavy rebuild, but the calculus of the moment favored keeping the eyes open a little longer, while temporary repairs shouldered permanent duty. Commanders were not villains. They were professionals asked to weigh one danger against another with imperfect tools and limited time. Yet every delay, every after the storm, every assumption that another window would open before the sea closed its hand, wrote itself into the steel. What changed afterward was everything that could change. The two remaining towers were fitted with escape capsules and stripped of pretense when weather menaced. Not long after, they were decommissioned entirely as airborne early warning took over, and missiles replaced bomber formations in the nightmares of planners. On charts, a wreck symbol marked where Old Shaky lay. Fishermen told and retold stories of nets snagging on something that rose for a breath, flashed with a skin of rust and barnacle, then slipped back into the dark with the weight of a lost machine. For the families, the disaster never moved to the past tense. The tower had been a workplace with a galley big enough for jokes and a rec room where tired men watched a flickering movie on a sheet tacked to a wall. Bunks had names taped to them in grease pencil. There were routines for laundry and watch relief and the Sunday ritual of listening for the helicopter's approach, that brief wobble of shadow over the pad that meant mail and fruit and a face not yet gaunt with shipboard fatigue. All of those domestic details were the point of the place, because vigilance is made of human hours as much as electronics. When the platform went, it took the small life inside it with the same indifference it showed the big purpose. Stand on a winter beach east of Long Island and watch the weather come in from the gray line, and you can almost hear what the crew heard in the final hours. The wind's steady drone, the clang of something loose far down in the legs, the creak that repeats until you know it too well. Somewhere out beyond the color change, Texas Tower 4 lies in a tangle of beams. The sea is patient enough to erase grain by grain. Its last message survives because it is the shape of every preventable failure spoken in 3 words. We're breaking up. The sentence holds physics and policy and the hard truth that a system is not just the machines and the manuals, but also the pauses between decisions and the ordinary human wish that one more hour might make a difference. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.